Evaluating defensive performance in MLB has long been a really difficult proposition. Do you trust fielding percentage, total zone rating, or DRS? A lot of it ended up being up to opinion, but in recent years we've seen the development of a couple key stats that have redefined how we look at fielding itself, courtesy of Baseball Savant. It's primarily using these stats I'm going to be breaking down who the worst player is defensively at every position in MLB today. Now, before we get started, this is going to be a combination of three different perspectives. 1. A player's personal history, which concerns what they've done over the course of their entire career. 2. What they've done recently, as in the last couple years, as improvement with the glove is certainly a real thing, and I wouldn't want to fault a guy like Xander Bogaerts, who long graded out poorly, only to see big strides in recent seasons. And 3. I'm going to require that any player being selected for a position has to currently reside at that position. The last thing I want to mention before we get started is that I'm going to be selecting a DH and utility player for this video as well, simply because breaking down defense is fun for me, and I don't think guys who don't have a primary position or who have been relegated to only be able to hit because their fielding is so bad should be able to get off that easy. With that being said, let's hop right into it, this time going from right field to catcher instead of the opposite way like I normally do, meaning the first player we're going to be talking about today is Nick Castellanos. How horrible has Nick been since he made his transition from a terrible fielding third baseman to corner outfielder in 2018? Well, try this on for size. His total of negative 66 outs above average is not only the worst for every major league player over this time period, but it's also over doubly as bad as the next closest right fielder, with the recently retired Charlie Blackmon coming in a distant second at negative 27. This includes the worst season in recorded history in this regard during his first year with Detroit in 2018, when he posted negative 23. He's even worse in fielding run value, at negative 94, with negative 14 of those being tallied just last year, the lowest total in the major leagues overall. We could go even further into his negative 14.5 career D-WAR, or negative 121 DRS, but I don't really think we have to. Just know, he's got horrible range, a truly subpar arm, zero speed to speak of, and what's more, he's only getting older from here, with him set to turn 33 in just a few days. Just based on the fact that Castellanos is so ridiculously bad, center field was inevitably going to be an upgrade, but I don't think I was personally prepared for how much of an upgrade it would be, as there's no player in contention for this spot that's posted even negative 10 outs above average since 2020, with the worst overall being JJ Bleday at negative 7. And while he certainly didn't perform well there in 2024, putting up negative 3, he wasn't quite as bad as my personal choice here, TJ Friedl, who not only ranked tied for third worst among all center fielders last year in this regard with a total of negative 4, but also combined this with negative 5 fielding run value. And it's not like DRS or D-WAR liked him any better, with marks of negative 5 and negative 0.3 in those regards as well. He's certainly not even in the same league of terrible as someone like Nick or a few other guys we're going to discuss today, but this doesn't change the fact that he probably is the worst defensive center fielder in Major League Baseball right now. The MLB season is fast approaching, and I know I personally am looking forward to going to a number of Angels games this year, as I live in Orange County, as well as a couple concerts or local fairs and the like. And thanks to SeatGeek, I'm going to be plugged into all of them, as they have over 70,000 listed events on the app. This includes everything I just mentioned, along with all major sports leagues. My personal favorite part of the app is the fact that it actually rates every available ticket on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of value, allowing you to easily see what's a good deal or not, which for me saves a decent amount of time I'll usually spend scrolling and scrolling trying to compare prices or locations. It's not all I look at, but it is a helpful tool. And remember as well that every single purchase is backed by their buyer's guarantee, which should give you an ultimate sense of security with every purchase you make. Pause here if you want to see exactly what that entails. With opening day fast approaching, you guys can use code MADETHECUT10 for 10% off your next set of tickets. That's 10% off of any tickets, not just those for baseball games, with code MADETHECUT10. Make sure to click the link in our description to download the app and have the code automatically added if you want to use it later. Thank you again to SeatGeek for sponsoring this video, and thank you to you if you sat through this whole thing. Now, let's get back to our video. Moving over to left field, we have an interesting circumstance where there is obviously an active player who deserves to be here, but since he's no longer playing this position routinely, I can't really justify selecting him. But don't worry, if you know who I'm talking about, we'll get to him later. Our actual pick here, Andrew Benintendi, has certainly earned his spot. Since he's signed in Chicago, he's been nothing short of objectively awful out there, with his own mark of negative 18 OAA since 2023 being just one behind the absolute worst. Throw in negative 2.6 D-WAR and negative 16 DRS, and you have one of the more startling drop-offs in recent MLB history, as he actually won a Gold Glove as recently as 2021 with the Kansas City Royals. Our next stop brings us to third base, where if you've been following along for the last couple weeks in this channel, there will be a predictable culprit, as Rafael Devers, since he made his debut in 2017, has had the worst outs above average there among active players at negative 28, the worst DRS at negative 62, the second worst D-WAR at negative 3.6, and an overall atrocious negative 21 fielding run value. This includes a 2021 season that saw him register tied for the second worst outs above average mark ever recorded for a third baseman at negative 13. It's truly bizarre to me that we've seen the controversy we have in the last little bit concerning him not wanting to move off of this position for Gold Glove $40 million man Alex Bregman, as it seems very clear that the lefty could benefit from a shift in position to somewhere less physically demanding, probably being either first base or DH, but it seems like he could still be entrenched at the hot corner come opening day, so he's definitely going to have to be our pick here for now. Moving over to shortstop, we have a very interesting situation, as according to Baseball Reference, my pick here in CJ Abrams actually has registered 5 DRS in the last 2 seasons. But when you dig into his advanced numbers provided by StatCast, it becomes very clear very fast that CJ is not close to even average out there. Since he made his debut in 2022, he's been worth negative 34 outs above average, a mark that's 9 worse than the next closest shortstop. This is actually so bad, it's the worst in the sport regardless of position over this time period. And his fielding run value wasn't any better, with his 2024 total of negative 13 being just 1 behind Castellanos for the Major League low. He's very athletic and still pretty young, so I do think he has a much better chance than most of these guys to rebound on this front, but I'm still not sure if I would want to bet on this outcome. What's pretty interesting about our choice for second base here, Jorge Polanco, is that usually when a shortstop converts to another position on the infield, they see some kind of improvement to their defense overall. But for Jorge, this really hasn't been the case, as since he made this move back in 2021 with the Twins, he's been the worst defender there in the sport consistently, with his negative 26 outs above average ranking last at this position. One recent development is the fact that he used to make up for this by being a pretty good hitter, slugging over 450 for a 3-year stretch, to go along with the WAR per full season mark of around 4. But last year represented a huge drop-off, not really in his defense, which was predictably terrible, but in his overall production, seeing his OPS plus cratered to 93, and his overall value dropped to just 1.3 in 118 games. For guys in this list, the only way they can really stick around consistently is if they produce offensively, much like Devers. So if Polanco can't manage to get back to this going forward, it's likely his days in the big leagues will be numbered. Remember what I said about your bat keeping you in the starting lineup? Well, this applies to first base perfectly, as Vladimir Guerrero Jr. has been playing atrociously there since 2020. Prior to that season, he had registered the worst defensive year in third base history in 2019 with negative 20 outs above average, and has since posted negative 32 at the easiest position to play on the field, a total that's 12 worse than the next closest in Rhys Hoskins. There's actually not a single defensive statistic that really paints him in a good light, whether it be D-WAR, DRS, or fielding run value, with all of these being in the proverbial toilet among not only players at his own position, but in the overall defensive landscape. This might make him the most undeserving Gold Glover currently still active in the big leagues, as he somehow took home this award back in 2022 despite posting negative 0.7 D-WAR and negative 3 fielding run value. At catcher now, we have the Padres' Luis Campusano, who despite a semi-limited 2024 relative to a lot of these other guys, is still set to have an everyday role in 2025. And that's kind of crazy, considering the atrocious totals he put up in about half a season last year. In about 2,100 total pitches caught, he placed second worst in catcher framing runs at negative 8, and tied for third worst in both blocking and stealing runs at negative 3, with pretty much everyone in front of him on all of these leaderboards having significantly more time behind the plate. This resulted in a total fielding run value of negative 13, a mark that could climb as high as negative 20 to 25 in the upcoming season if he can't find some way to improve on pretty much everything a catcher does. Moving on to our 2 more eclectic positions, we have the worst fielding DH in baseball, which should be pretty obvious if you've been following the sport closely since he made his debut, being hulking lefty Kyle Schwarber, who since 2016 when they first started tracking this stuff is third worst in outs above average at negative 72, despite not even playing the field last year. If he had even part of the time, he probably would be first in this regard, or I guess last. Much like Castellanos, we could be here all day talking about his negative 10.8 D-WAR, negative 54 DRS, or negative 64 fielding run value, which included back-to-back marks of negative 19 or worse, but I think we'll cut it off here with the acknowledgement of how grateful the Phillies must be that he's no longer lumbering around their outfield, instead soaking up the vast majority of their at-bats at the one position he can't defensively hurt them at. And lastly, our utility player is going to be current Ray Christopher Morel, who's managed to play at least 50 innings in his career at second base, third base, shortstop, left field, center field, and right field, and at least 500 innings at 3 of those. What's he managed to post between all of those positions? How about negative 22 fielding run value and negative 29 OAA, the 5th worst total in the majors since he made his debut in 2022, despite playing significantly less games overall than each of the players in front of him. It's rare to find a guy who has played such significant time at so many different positions, yet hasn't managed to register a positive performance in any of them, instead being outright terrible at pretty much all of them. Much like Polanco, he'll need to improve his play at the plate from last season if he wants to continue to see starting time at the big league level going forward. Now, thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, please consider liking and subscribing and checking out any one of these recommended videos. Have a great rest of your day, everybody, and I'll see you in the next one.